You said the dying Republican neocon fringe. Of course, I love the sound of that, but it's hard to see. You're looking, obviously, in more broadly than I am, because right now I see Fox News as just this pure, crazed neocon war propaganda operation. Mark Levin, the least credible person in broadcasting, is like in charge of the government. I mean, I'm overstating, of course, but it's like they seem very powerful right now, that part of the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, Mark Levin. But you're saying they're a dying fringe?
Again, it's looking at it right now, it's very easy to think that the neocons have once again taken over the foreign policy apparatus of the Republican Party. But I think we need to look at a couple things. There is no popular support for going to war directly with Iran. We have to acknowledge there is concern about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, but there's not a constituency for going to war with Iran. And there hasn't really ever been one, but most of your Republican voters don't want this.
I looked up the numbers, the polling numbers, and I think the AIDS virus is more popular than the idea of going to war with Iran. I think it's actually 16% national support.
Yeah, and that was from YouGov. Brookings has done polls, the University of Maryland. There was one joke of a poll that was clearly manipulated that's being circulated by the neocons, but there's poll after poll from both liberal, nonpartisan, conservative institutions show there's not broad support for this. In addition, you now have within the administration a lot of people that don't look like the types of people that used to staff Republican administrations, mainly George W. Bush administration, but also you could argue the first Trump term in terms of foreign policy. These are people like Bridge Colby, people like Joe Kent, people like Michael Anton, who have different ideas about American foreign policy and are much different than, say, the types of people that a Paul Wolfowitz or a John Bolton would hire into administration. So they don't have a lot of people within the power structure right now, at least on the political side. Within the career side and the military, absolutely. And then in addition, you have to acknowledge is that there's now an institutional structure that didn't exist in 2016 of organizations that are able to get a message out around foreign policy that challenges what Ben Rhodes called the Blob, even though he's a card-carrying member of the Blob. These traditional organizations that push for American primacy and intervention. So you have a lot of pieces coming together that show that neoconservatism on the right is in retreat. But that's in a lot of cases when movements can be most dangerous, is that I really sense in a lot of ways why they have gone all out is because they're desperate, is they see, particularly on the right, the younger cohort coming up. And we talked about this. A lot of these people make you and me look like Paul Wolfowitz in terms of our foreign policy beliefs.
I feel very, I always say this, but I feel very moderate. I am very moderate just by temperament. And I don't meet really any moderate young people on these questions at all.
Right. And they see that. So that's why there's such an all-out effort right now to push this, because they think it's their last chance.
I think they're right. So I think even now, we're sort of officially clinging to the idea that Israel's goal here is a non-nuclear Iran. That's not true. Their goal is regime change, I think it's fair to say. But I do think Donald Trump's goal is not regime change. I don't think he wants to be, I know he doesn't want to be in a regime change where he just doesn't want Iran to have a bomb. He said that a million times. My question is a practical one. Is it possible to shut down a nuclear program with an air campaign?
I think you can roll it back. I think you can severely damage it. But look, I'll use an argument that the advocates of the Iraq War made, is that you can't truly shut down a weapons of mass destruction campaign with certain people in charge of the country. Right. You can't truly shut it down because you can't trust inspectors.
That's right.
You can't truly trust intelligence. They were doing that in a very manipulative way, but there's a sliver of truth in that. So if you truly want to get rid of an Iranian nuclear weapon program and make sure it's totally dismantled, it's likely going to require a regime change or some type of occupation or, invasion. That may sound extreme, but if you stop and think about it, that's the truth.
We're sorry to say it, but this is not a very safe country. Walk through Oakland or Philadelphia. Yeah, good luck. So most people, when they think about this, want to carry a firearm, and a lot of us do. The problem is there can be massive consequences for that. Ask Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse got off in the end, but he was innocent from the first moment. It was obvious on video, and he was facing life in prison anyway. That's what the anti-gun movement will do. They'll throw you in prison for defending yourself with a firearm. And that's why a lot of Americans are turning to Byrna. It's a proudly American company. Byrna makes self-defense launchers that hundreds of law enforcement departments trust. They've sold over 600,000 pistols, mostly to private citizens who refuse to be empty-handed. These pistols, and I have one, fire rock-hard kinetic rounds or tear gas rounds and pepper projectiles, and they stop a threat from up to 60 feet away. There are no background checks. There are no waiting periods. Byrna can ship it directly to your door. You can't be arrested for defending yourself with a Byrna pistol. Visit Byrna, BYRNA.com or your local Sportsman's Warehouse to get yours today. Byrna.com.
Now, you can roll again.
Well, so I have thought about it, but not as deeply as you have, I would bet. Can you flesh that out a little bit? Why would an air campaign not solve the nuclear problem?
Because you would need to verify that all the centrifuges are destroyed. You need to verify that all the knowledge, both, scientists, other engineers, that they are accounted for, in some cases killed, that there's no files remaining, and that all the centrifuges, all the different pieces, all the nuclear material, the triggers, anything that could be part of this are destroyed. And then any development of the delivery systems, it is incredibly difficult to do that. It's impossible to do that purely through air. You're going to need inspections. You're going to need people on the ground verifying this. And again, what we've seen before is the argument that the inspectors aren't going to find everything. So I think you can kind of see where this is going. And so the argument likely that you're going to see, and it's not totally incorrect, is that to truly get rid of the threat of a nuclear Iran, an Islamic Republic with a nuclear bomb, is you're going to need regime change. And so, as I've said previously, that's why in my mind, this really isn't about a nuclear bomb. And I think I want to be clear, for President Trump it is. And for a lot of good people who rightly are concerned about nuclear Iran, it is about that. But for a lot of others, it's about regime change. And I think that the consequences of that for the United States, for the Middle East, even for Israel, have not been thought through. Because a lot of people, just like in Iraq, they aren't thinking about what comes next if we get rid of Iran as an Islamic Republic.
We just had the Iraq War. I mean, it only started 22 years ago. And we still have troops there. We just got out of Afghanistan a few years ago after 20 years. The memory is not just fresh. It's not even a memory. It's still a present reality. We still have troops there.
I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, Iraq is a thriving liberal democracy. Afghanistan just achieved 100% female literacy. Which was always the goal. What I don't know what you're talking about, but joking aside, is there's still a lot of people who think we can do this, that we can actually change a regime and instill liberalism through the point of the barrel of a gun. That there is still that thinking in Washington, D.C., that they have learned nothing from Iraq, from Syria, from Libya, from Afghanistan, from Yemen, from other places. It does not work.
My problem is bigger, which is what happens to the American empire, which is obviously contracting. We don't have the will or the money to sustain it at current levels. Obviously, we are challenged by China and maybe other countries for, supremacy over shipping lanes and over the air and all this. Things are changing really, really fast. So the empire is getting smaller, but there's got to be a way to unwind it slowly, thoughtfully, with minimal damage. I think our adversaries, not even enemies, but just challengers, to our position would like to crumble in one day. So there's this incentive to really kick the legs out from under America right now. Do you feel that?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so. And there's a lot of people, I think, in China that would love us to see bogged down in the Middle East. You and I, we don't believe that we should be involved in the Ukrainian war, but if you're somebody that thinks that Ukraine is the most important thing for liberal democracy, this war is going to make it harder, if not impossible, to support Ukraine. It's going to make it harder.
Why is that? Why would a war with Iran make it impossible to continue supporting Ukraine?
It's a good question. So, after the October 7th attacks, you had Joe Biden go on 60 Minutes and say, after he was asked by the host, I forget what host it was, but he was asked, are we going to be able to support both Israel and Ukraine? And, his dying brain said, oh, come on, man. Of course we can. We're the most powerful country ever. We won World War II. Of course we can do both. And a week later, the United States was forced to redirect a shipment of artillery shells from Ukraine to Israel to support them in their fight against Hamas. And that right there just shattered the illusion that we can do both.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.